All right, guys, we have got another power rankings for you, and this is so tough because things are getting spicy. Like, if you're thinking about where teams have gone just in the last few weeks or so, where the heck do you put LA Thieves? Where do you put Dallas Empire? How high do you put the Toronto Ultra? There are so many teams that have made so many moves, and with that, we're going to do our best to go through and put all of these teams in order. I'm going to start at number 12. We'll go power rankings all the way up to number 1. And if at any point along the way you guys disagree, make sure you tell me down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into our number 12 team, which is, if you guys haven't guessed already, I'm sure you probably have, the London Royal Ravens. So overall, I do have them at number 12. The last time I did a power rankings, they were also at number 12. Since then, they have been playing a little bit more competitively. They do have a couple wins. Their map record is increasing quite a bit, 2-12 overall with a 17-34 map record. But when you don't have a go-to game mode, especially if that game mode isn't hardpoint or search and destroy, it's really tough to start climbing these ladders. So they're 10th in hardpoint, 12th in S&D, 9th in control, and you got to give them credit at least. They've brought in like 7 or 8 different players throughout this entirety of the year. I do think bringing in Paul X and Zapdius helps them. Of course, they had a ton of success over in Challengers, and slowly but surely, the majority of the players from West Star early in the season have started to make their way into the CDL scene. So I think it's just a matter of time before they get a little bit better. I don't think they're going to be top 5 anytime soon, but I do want to see them start to take strides and move forward. Over on the right, you can see their recent matches. And outside of going to map 5 versus LA Thieves, that match was actually in the stage 2 major. Outside of that, they really just, at least they're winning maps, right? They're not winning any matches overall, but they're not getting 3-0'd all that often. So we'll see what happens with London moving forward. Hopefully they can gain some momentum, but we got London at number 12, which means number 11 is the other EU squad. Paris, if you look at their recent matches, lost to LAG in pretty decisive factor, lost to Seattle 1-3, LA Thieves 0-3. They did get a win over Florida, but that was way back during stage 2 groups. So it's been a little bit of a struggle for Paris overall. If you look at their record, 4-11 with the 23-37 map count. And again, it's very similar to London. If you look at their overall mode ranks, there's just nothing that, even if you have a hardpoint rank that's up in the 4th range or the 5th best hardpoint team range, then at least you can win 2 of those and try to steal a match against people by winning a control or an S&D, maybe a map 5. But it just hasn't been working for them. I do like the fact that they did make the move for temp by dropping fire, but that really hasn't solved their issues either. I think that they have good players. I just think the fact that they formed together late and they have made a roster change, it just, I don't know. They're just not where we expect them to be. I don't want to take a ton of time on them because in my last ones, I also had them as number 11th, as you can see by the up and the down arrow. So hopefully Paris starts to make some noise. I do want to see success out of the EU squads, but they're just not really playing all that well right now, which brings us to number 10. And this is a squad that, go back maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I had quite a bit of faith in, but LAG just isn't getting it done. You can see that right now I have them at number 10, and that is down 4 spots from the last time I did my power rankings. I really did have a struggle with, am I going to put them at like 6 or LA Thieves or Minnesota Rokkr? Like, who's going to go in that 6th spot? And now they've dropped all the way down to 10th. And if you look at their record and some of the things that are listed on the left-hand side here, it's not really all that bad. It's not that they just all the time play terribly. It's just the inconsistency. So overall record 6-9 with a map count of 24-33. What really plagues them is that they're the worst respawn team basically in the game. They're 12th in hardpoint and 11th in control. And you can be as good as you want to be at search and destroy, but if you ever end up losing a search map, if you lose map 2, you're probably not going to win because you just can't get it done in the hard points or in the control. And that's what we've seen out of LAG. I do think that they're making some changes. I think that they're making some headway. I like the fact that they went ahead, they made the roster move, they brought in Chino. He, of course, they looked good in their first matchup against Paris, taking that one in a 3-0 fashion. But before that, lost to Florida 0-3. They did get a win over LA Thieves, but that was before the LA Thieves roster move when LA really was playing like hot garbage. I mean, LA Thieves at one point in time was like the worst team, the worst org almost in the CDL. Like they were right there at 10, 11, 12 along with Paris and London. And then, of course, they did get that win against Atlanta, but now we're going way back, right? This team is totally different from that team, and the teams that they played back then were also totally different. So I'm hoping that we get a little bit of a turnaround out of LAG. I'm not sure that it's going to be coming, but I hope so, because they're a squad that seems to be having vibes, right? They have the vibes. They're playing a little bit better. Chino absolutely went off in the first matchup against Paris. Let's see if they can do it coming this weekend. They have a couple big time matches this upcoming weekend. We'll see if they build on it there. But that takes us to our number 9 squad, which is slowly but surely starting to climb. And it's one of those squads where you have to think like, okay, how far up are we going to move the Seattle Surge? Because they've looked pretty good. I think they're just missing one piece. You change one piece on the Seattle Surge, and I think they're going to be beating a lot of the teams that they haven't been beating before. So just to kind of start from the beginning, they are our number 9 ranked squad. They're up one position from where I had them a couple weeks ago. Overall, if you look at their map record and you look at their overall record, it doesn't look great. 4-10 with a map record of 20-33. Hardpoint, S&D, control, 9th, 12th. I mean, nothing really looks great here. And if you look at their recent matches, suffered the 0-3 loss to Chicago, but that was a lot closer than just looking at it on the surface and saying, okay, they lost 3-0. In the hardpoint, it was a 250-240 hardpoint. Chicago did have to make a series of plays to win that map 1, and they're just showing that they're dangerous. Pristini is playing much better throughout the course of Stage 2. Gunless is by far their best player. Gunless is absolutely going off. Octane's starting to give a little bit more than he was earlier in the season. I said it earlier, they're missing one little piece, and that one little piece is Looney. They're just not getting the production that they need out of Looney. Overall, in that matchup against Chicago, Looney had a .68, and he was by far the worst player in the lobby, and I do think that he's just holding them back. You've seen so many squads say, you know what? We're going to go ahead, we're going to make a roster move, and they've made those roster moves, and they've become a better squad because of it. I want to see Seattle do that. So they are competitive versus LA Thieves. Barely lost that one. Versus Chicago before that, 3-1 loss. They got the win over Florida, and before that match against Florida, they played Minnesota, and it was a really tight match against Minnesota. They're one piece away. I would like to see them go out and do whatever they can to get that one piece. We'll see what happens, but this is a team that I'm actually pretty high on. We'll see how much they can climb throughout this Stage 3. As we go ahead and move along here, this is another one of those teams that if they start to be as productive as they have been over the last week or so, it's a squad that you're going to have to watch out for, and that's the Florida Mutineers. I could see people even moving them higher than number 8. This is where I've had them before. I started the year having Florida as my number 4 overall team, and slowly but surely, they've just been pretty inconsistent. They haven't quite been getting it done like I expected that they would be getting it done. But we look at record, they're 7-10 with a 29-34 map record, and basically, I mean, their hard points, their controls, they're right in the middle of the league. So whoever they're playing, they might be able to win those hard points or those controls. They're not the best S&D team, but I think that will come with time. They did make the roster move to Havoc and letting go of Slacked. I'm not sure that it's paid off yet. In the one match that they did have against Minnesota where they got the 3-1 win, that match was basically carried by Skies and Awakening, as they have really been all year. I think Havoc had like a 0.7 across all game modes in that matchup with Minnesota. They really did thrive in that match because of the production they got from Awakening and Skies. But before that, 0-3 loss to Toronto, 1-3 loss to Seattle, 3-0 win against LAG. So it's just, they're one of those squads right now that I think are trying to find their way. I think Awakening, Big Wake, is like a top 10 player in the league. I mean, every time we see him, he is making big time plays all the way across the map. Doesn't matter the game mode. That guy's playing unbelievable. I think if they just get a little bit more from their SMGs, they're going to be a bunch better. But I can see Florida, when I think of them overall, every time they go into a matchup with, you know, some of those top 3 or 4 teams, I think they could absolutely get this done. Haven't been as consistent at that yet, but we'll see what happens moving forward, which brings us to our 7th ranked team. And I think this is a place that there might be some pushback here. So I have no idea where to put the Dallas Empire. And you might think, what the heck? The Dallas Empire as the 7th ranked team. I'll be the first to admit, I came into this year saying I am not moving Dallas off that number 1 spot until they show me that they can lose. Until somebody comes out and just absolutely just smacks them around and beats them and they don't win a major outside of Atlanta beating them and yada, 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 I'm not moving them. But as of late, it just seems like a sinking ship, if I'm being honest. And the biggest part of that is just the roster move. It just blows my mind. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I know Hastro came out, did that article, said that they needed like a second leader and more IGL, some more in-game leadership. And I don't know if getting rid of your best player by far in every game mode is the right move, but we'll see what happens. But to me, they're not playing well. They're losing to teams that they should be more competitive with, and you get rid of Hugh, who's your best player. Shotzzy and Illy have not been the Shotzzy and Illy that they were last year. They're just not playing up to that same potential. It is really hurting them in terms of trying to get around the map. Of course, Fellow is in now, so we'll see what types of changes he makes. But if you look at like their ranks and their overall record, so 12-8 record with a 46-38 map count, Hardpoint Control, they're 4th, SND, they're 6th. Like, these ranks are really good, but I just don't have the confidence in Dallas anymore. And I don't know how to put that into words, but when I think about Dallas going into matches with whoever, I don't know. I think that Hugh did a ton to carry them the entirety of this Cold War season. And now that he's gone, Crim's not playing great. Shotzzy and Illy, they're just, nobody's playing great. Hugh was the one that put everybody in his backpack, and now he's not there. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. This was a tough one to me because it was, how far does Dallas slide in these recent power rankings? If we move up to number 6, this is a squad that the last time I did my power rankings, you guys said I was crazy and they need to be put like 11th or 12th. This org is a sinking ship. They have nothing going for them, and that's the LA Thieves. And all of a sudden, it seems like they've turned things around. Now, I'll agree with you guys, but when I made my last power rankings, I wasn't sure how far to drop them, and I said I want to give them just one more chance, one more opportunity to show that they can compete, and now all of a sudden they're doing that. So just to kind of go through the stats overall, 11-8 record with a 37-35 map count. You can see that in each of those individual game modes, they're right there, kind of middle of the pack. Of course, they brought in Venom probably about a month or so ago now. They brought in Draza to replace Slasher. That was a move that when I did my last power rankings, that had just happened. And that's when you guys were saying, nope, sell all your stocks on these guys. There's no shot that they're going to be good. And I get it. But moving Kenny to main AR, I mean, Kenny's a fantastic player. He's one of the best players in the league, whether he's running an SMG or an AR, or he's at the flex, or he's at the main AR. I mean, this guy just produces no matter what. So you have to give him credit because he has a big part to do with why they're successful right now. But look at those recent matches. Got a win over London, which you'd expect them to do. got a win over Seattle. Even though it was a 3-2 and it was pretty close, they still clutched up and beat a team that is pretty competitive right now in Seattle. They got smoked by Toronto. Everybody got smoked by Toronto. And then before that, the win against New York and the win against London, those two wins came during the Stage 2 major. And that's really when they made the roster move and they started to turn things around. So I'm interested to see what could happen here. I think as they're putting out a lot of their content, I think you're seeing that the squad is just vibing a little bit better. Even the content from earlier in the year when Temp and Slasher were there, it just seemed to be a little weird to me. I don't know how to really quantify that, but it seems like right now that they're having fun and they're playing together and they're vibing with each other. And I think that's gone a long way to how they're playing overall. So I'm excited to see what LA can do moving forward. They are in a tough group, but at this point, everybody's got tough teams in their groups, right? So let's see what can happen for them as they play throughout Stage 3, getting ready for the Stage 3 major. And I'm excited to see where they end up going over the next few weeks, which brings us to our number 5 ranked squad. I've seen them in other people's power rankings all the way up to like 4. I've seen them recently all the way down to like 9 or 10. I do have confidence in this squad, and that's the Minnesota Rokkr. So I had them at 5 before. I have them at 5 now, even though their map record and their overall record aren't quite as good as like what we just saw from LA Thieves and what we just saw from Dallas. I think you can't really take a peek at that because a lot of those losses and those map losses came from when Major Maniac was still on the squad, and they look totally different by taking Priesta, moving him to flex. He has been incredible in the flex role, and of course bringing in Standy, placing him next to Attach. Even though Attach did not have a great match in their loss to Florida, every other match this year, he has been phenomenal. I would say he's been their most consistent player. And of course, the difference right now with Minnesota is that they've started to win some map ones. You can see the hardpoint rank right there at 11th. For the longest time, they were just absolutely in the basement of the CDL when it came to hardpoint. They would win against teams like Dallas by winnings map 2, 3, and 5, and now you're starting to see them actually come out and win map 1, and they're dropping a search or two here or there. But if they can just continue what they're doing, the progression in hardpoint, get comfortable again in S&Ds, I think that they're easily one of the top 5 squads. I think anytime you see them play a Toronto, or of course Atlanta and Chicago aren't in their group, but a Dallas or any other squad like that. In fact, if we go through the recent matches, they did suffer that bad loss to Florida. But before that, they were the first matchup of Championship Sunday against Toronto in the Stage 2 major. And in that major, those maps were super tight. And I really do think if Minnesota would have beat Toronto, I think they would have went on to beat Dallas and then make it to the grand finals against Atlanta. I don't know if they match up well against Atlanta in the same way that Toronto does, but I think they were going to go on a roll there. And before that match with Toronto, they got the improbable victory over Chicago with accuracy pushing, getting that 3-piece in round 11. We've seen that over and over again. And then against Dallas, even though they lost 2-3 to Dallas, they were no doubt the better squad in that matchup. That was the 0.1 control loss, and that was the map 5 round 11 where Priesta stuck his teammate and basically just kind of threw away that last map 5. I mean, I think Minnesota is competing with every single team, and I know that they suffered that bad loss of Florida. I don't think that they were ready to go, but we'll see what happens moving forward. This is a squad that I'm really excited for, which brings us to another squad I'm super excited for, which is the New York Subliners. So overall, 11-7 record, 36-32. You can go through the ranks there. They've been unbelievable at hardpoint, which is probably something that most people didn't expect. S&D and control can use some work, but all that kind of goes out the window. I actually didn't fix the graphic down towards the bottom, but all that goes out of the window because Diamond Con is out and Hydra is in. So with Hydra being a part of New York now, I think that he showed just what he's capable of in that matchup against Atlanta, where they got that 3-2 victory, their first match of the first week of stage 3. Before that, they suffered the loss to LA Thieves. That was in the stage 2 major. They suffered the loss to Dallas. That was also in the stage 2 major. They did get a win against Toronto, which was the end of stage 2 groups. But I had a ton of confidence in New York going into that stage 2 major, and they just did not look like themselves. Clay came out, put out a tweet that just said a lot of the COVID stuff and you know, the social distancing, and I think it was the mental health was really getting to him. It's nice to see them start to have some success again. And Clay played absolutely like a man on a mission against LA. Hydro played fantastic against those SMGs. So I'm excited to see what that team can do against teams that's not named Atlanta. Or I know they still have to play Chicago in this stage, but what are they going to do against LA Thieves? What are they going to do against teams like that where you think they might be somewhat on the same plane, somewhat on the same playing field? Let's see what they do against those squads. So I'm excited for New York. I think anytime you have Clayster on your squad, you better watch out because that man always brings it, always has his squad ready to go, except for in stage 2 playoffs. But we won't talk about that. I'm excited for New York. I've got him at number 4, which brings me to number 3. You guys probably guessed this. Optic Chicago. So overall record of 12-7. I've had them slotted as like the 3rd best team basically forever. I mean, at the beginning of the year, it was Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago. Now things have changed around a little bit with Dallas slipping down the rankings. But where they get it done is in the respawns, hardpoint and control, 2nd best team in the game. Their S&D started this year. That was the biggest knock, that Chicago can't play S&D. And now all of a sudden they've worked their way all the way up to the 5th best S&D team. This squad is nasty. Recent matches, 3-0 win against Seattle, 3-1 over London. They did have that loss, that improbable loss to Minnesota that knocked them out of stage 2 playoffs. But before that, got a win against Seattle. They lost to Toronto. That was at the beginning of stage 2 playoffs, but everybody lost to Toronto basically in that stage 2 playoffs. So they look really good. And I think in that matchup against Seattle, even though the map 1 was tight, I think they came out and they took care of business in map 2 and map 3. I did a tier ranking yesterday of main ARs. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it. I love the conversations. But if you really take a step back and look at what Formal's done this year, he's been playing fantastic. If you just compare what he's done to some of the other main ARs on other squads, the things that he's doing in respawns, and especially the way that he's playing in Search and Destroy, he's been lights out. He has a big part of why there's been successful. Also, Dashy has too. I think Optic can beat anybody in the game. I think that they're starting to find their stride. They were definitely, I'll come out and say this, they were the better team in that matchup against Minnesota. I think Minnesota might have gotten just a little bit lucky, not a ton lucky, a little bit lucky that they were able to get that play or make that play happen in that map 5 round 11 and get out of there with a victory. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but if I'm a squad in the CDL, I really don't want to see Optic on my schedule, especially when it gets to the stage 3 major. In group play, they will end up playing the Atlanta FaZe again, so I cannot wait for that one. Atlanta FaZe, Optic Chicago, the first time around, they were a Beezy 3-piece away from winning that matchup. Let's see what happens in this one. I think those squads are a lot closer than what people will give them credit for, which brings us to our top 2. And this one was kind of tough for me. So I wasn't quite sure how high to put Toronto. And I'll just come out and say that right now, I think that I had to put them where they are. So my number 2 squad is, I might blow some people's minds with this, but at number 2, I have the Atlanta FaZe. For the first time all year, I took Atlanta from that 1 spot down to that number 2 spot, despite the fact, I mean, look at their credentials, guys. Look at their numbers. 14-3 record, 51-22 map count, 1st in hardpoint, 1st in S&D, 1st in control. I mean, these guys are nasty. I absolutely get it. But when there's hiccups and when they start to slow down a bit, I feel like you have to be fair and just knock them down a bit. If you look at what Toronto's done recently and you look at what Atlanta's done recently, look at their recent matches. The first match of stage 3 groups, They lost to New York, and yes, it was tight, but New York just had a roster change. They just brought in Hydra. You would think that's a match that Atlanta should win. And then before that, they lost in the stage 2 major finals, the grand finals to Toronto, 5-3. But there's really there's no excuses there, right? You can't say well, they got lucky or they should have won this map and that map. No, Toronto was clearly, it was not even close. It's not like Toronto got lucky in a round 11 search and they squeaked out a 3-2 victory. This was a best of 9. And there's no doubt about it that when those two teams squared off on that weekend, Toronto was the better squad. You cannot convince me otherwise. Sure, they beat Dallas and they beat Toronto in the early stages of that major and they beat London and whatever. But when you're talking about where they're at right now over the last week or two, I just think that Toronto's a better squad. I think that Toronto's playing better. Now, if I had to put my entire bank account on is Atlanta or Toronto going to win when they play next, I might say Atlanta, but I have to give credit to what Toronto has accomplished and how they've been playing over the last couple weeks. It's just how I feel deep down. I would be more afraid to play Atlanta right now, but I don't know. It's just how I feel overall, which brings us to our number 1 squad, the Toronto Ultra. And the last time I did this, guys, right now I have them at number 1. This is up 9 places from the last time I did a power rankings. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So just going through overall record, map record, you can look at the hardpoint ranks, all that stuff there on the left side of the screen. Even with that, a lot of that doesn't come into play because that's when Methods was on the squad. It's when they were struggling quite a bit. But Insight has come on, and what he has done, he is by far, over the last couple weeks since he's come into the league, I know that it's a small sample size. Insight is the best main AR in the league. If you haven't seen my tier list, again, for main ARs, go look at it because I break down the stats. I compare his stats to Formals and Arcities and Crims and Claysters, and it's not even close. The dude's putting up a 1.17 in hardpoint. He's got a 1.52 SND KD, his first blood percentage, his hardpoint kills per 10 minutes, just the speed at which he's playing with and the rate at which he's slaying, he's playing unbelievable, and you have to give him credit for that. So I think it's a big part of their turnaround. Kleenex has also been playing great. The stage 2 player of the stage was Bance, and that's the ultimate difference maker because when Bance doesn't play well, he put out that tweet where I think it was to his girlfriend where he was saying I'm just playing like crap. I maybe I should just give up. When he put out that tweet and that screenshot, that shows you that this is a totally different team when he starts to figure it out, right? When they were not playing well, Bance was not playing well. They just weren't vibing. And now Insight comes aboard. Bance starts to figure it out. Bance went absolutely bananas in the stage 2 major, and that ultimately propelled them to the victory. Look at their recent matches. And the reason why I put them at number 1, because not only did they win that head-to-head against Atlanta, but they in dominant fashion beat Dallas. In dominant fashion beat Florida. They beat Dallas and Minnesota both, and you could go back. They beat even more teams during that stage 2 major. This squad is absolutely on fire, and I know that people might think it's a little bit of an overreaction, but it's just how I feel overall about the Toronto Ultra. I can't explain it any more than that. So this video is approaching a half hour, so I want to go ahead and wrap it up here. As always, down in the comments, let me know how you're thinking overall, what you're feeling. Do you disagree? I could see a couple places, right? The Atlanta versus Toronto thing, maybe how far down to slide Dallas. That's another talking point that people might be a little bit indifferent on. So let me know down in the comments. If you're new, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Thank you guys so much. We will see you in the next upload.